this is more related to how in management consulting the communication should happen. That subject is related to that. It's a Minto Pyramid thing that we will hear the concepts and how that could be implemented, because how do we really make the communications with the client? How do we make the communications internally, verbal communications, communications through the body language? So even in terms of our representation communications, also presentations and all, how do we really make our communications more effective? I mean, there's a very traditional style used by many of the leading consulting companies, the Minto Pyramid style. And therefore, it has a behavioral aspects also linked to the communication. So I requested Kannita to do a research on that and make a presentation. Purpose is to also see that how do we really make it effective into our own communication? How do we internalize it into our communications also? So over to Kannita. Kannita, start.
Hello, everyone. First of all, I would really like to thank sir for giving me this topic in the first place. It's very interesting. And I hope my interest and my excitement about this is something I can easily share with you all. So I'll share my screen, then I'll give a quick introduction about myself so that you all know there's some credibility in what I'm going to say. And then I'm going to show you my slides, and then you all can tell me if the excitement is there. So first of all, very, very good evening to everybody. Thank you for joining in the session at the end of the day. Specifically to Siddhima and Prithvi. I think they're the only ones who are new on the team who've joined us today.
Now we have
And
Ishosri. I can see Ishosri also.
oh, Ishashri also. Hi, Ishashri. Sorry, I cannot see the names anymore. So if I miss out anybody, please raise your hand. I can see that though. So thank you for joining in. Like I was saying, that this was a very exciting project to read about this, to understand it to depth. The reason I'm calling this phase one is because Barbara Minto, when she talks about the pyramid principle, honestly, it doesn't end over 1 hour session. There's so much we need to learn. There's so much we can imbibe more. Okay, to cut it short, so I'm Kannita Biswas, and I've done my BA in English honors from St. Stephen's College. And since school, I've been very, very excited and interested in communication. Of course, not in the more corporate and traditional way, but I used to do a lot of theater and elocution. So since I was I don't since I can remember, honestly, when I was like 8 or 7, I've been doing plays, and I've always been taught to communicate a certain way. As I was growing up, we did a lot of elocution, extempore, and then we were told and put on stage to act and behave in ways where I could immediately catch the audience's attention. That is how I used to be. That's how I used to be judged, and that is how we went into competitions. Now, why is that important here? Because through the Minto Pyramid Principle, that is exactly what Barbara Minto is saying, and we will elaborate through the presentation that how important communication in general in all forms of relationships are. And most definitely in a situation where you're going to be talking about your ideas to your clients, making sure they listen to you, not only listen to you, but tomorrow they pick up the call and tell you, thank you, your idea makes sense. And this is what we want to implement. This is how your ideas are going to make sense in my business processes. Um, so here, let's go on with the slides, and I will stop me wherever. Please go on with questions, anything, however. Okay, so now, like I was saying, communication clearly is the key element in all human interactions. It's not only about in a very day-to-day basis. If you think about this, if you read a very interesting novel, it's about how much you know about the novel. It's about how much you care about the novel and how much it meant to you. But tomorrow, when you're sitting with your friends and they ask you what was the last thing you read, and you really want to tell them about the novel, often it happens that they don't understand, or they don't relate as much as you do. Okay, that could always be the reason that they might not be as interested in the topics the novel covers as you are. But the other most relevant or most possible thing could be that maybe you're not able to communicate what you feel for the novel as it read to you. And that is when there's a huge responsibility on you to make sure that the person listening to you, the person you're talking to, understands your ideas. Now, of course, human beings have a lot of things going on in their head. They have their own lives to understand in different segments. And the amount of time a particular person spends with you, there's only a 20-second attention span. That's what psychologists say is what each human has. So, in order to make sure that your information and your ideas are being fit into that 20-second gap so that they are able to adapt that information and go back to it in a clear and easy way is what we want to do. Now, it's very interesting, how people process information. We'll go on to do a few experiments throughout this presentation where you'll be able to understand how we work on it. I mean, honestly, when I was reading about this, I do this every day, but when you're reading about it and you're told that other people do it, it makes sense that how cyclical it becomes in your own mind itself. One very important thing is that when we say we like art, when we say we read novels, or when we say we watch films and movies, it's because we like stories. We like to listen to what another person is saying. We like to know what happens to the protagonist. We need to know what happens next. So, what does happen next? Why? That brings us to why are we talking about a pyramid? I mean, what happens next is the pyramid. Why are we talking about it? Because of the Minto Pyramid Principle. Now, just like we said, in communication being a key in all relationships, it's as key in consulting as well. You can have a plethora of ideas, you can have a large section of thoughts. Honestly, you can be the smartest person in the room, but if you're not able to communicate your ideas to your audience, you only remain the smart person within yourself. People talk about it, but your ideas don't take form. Your ideas might be left in a space where they are only words. And that is where we want to penetrate. We want to make sure that our clients are listening to us. They're not only listening to us, but they're adapting and imbibing the information that we're giving to them. And similarly, what our clients want is to be understood. Everybody, every human being in this world wants to be understood when they're sharing a problem. Now, what do we need? What does Intueri need? We have the smartest people in the room. We have the best communication skills, but we only need to better them. And we can do that using the Minto Pyramid Principle. Now, a few key takeaways about the Minto Pyramid Principle before we go on and, completely dissect it and understand it, how we can implement it, how we can understand it better are that you always start with an answer. In a pyramid principle, if you imagine a pyramid always has an apex on the top. So that's where your answer to the main question, the main problem rests. So you always start with your answer. The next steps, as the pyramid gets broader, is you tell people that why is your answer your answer. You summarize supporting arguments that give base to the answer. But still, a small pyramid would hardly last. So you put another foundation base where another level of ideas support the level above. And we're gonna talk about the various relationships that various ideas at various levels share. But this is a few quick key takeaways. And just as Sir mentioned, the Minto Pyramid Principle is a very important principle, proposal, method of communication, whatever you all might want to call it. It's also used by other consulting firms. I've only named a few: Bain, McKinsey, BCG. It actually took form in McKinsey. We're going to see how. But before we go into the logical and all the rules and structural parts of it, I want you all to see something. Can you all hear? Can everybody hear?
Yes, yes.
The video could be heard?
Yes, Kannita.
Oh,
Yes.
I'm so sorry. I'll play it.
No. The video can't be heard.
Video can't be heard. 1
second.
second. I'm so sorry. I'm going to present again. I think now it should play, but please do tell me if it's not.
Yes.
First there was PlayStation, aka PS1. Then there's PS2, PS3, and now PS4. And that makes sense. You'd think after Xbox, there'd be Xbox 2. But no. Next came Xbox 360. And now, after 360, comes Xbox One. Why one? Maybe that's how many seconds of thought they put into naming it.
Can you get the butter, please?
However, with the Xbox One, I can control my entire entertainment system using voice commands. Up until now, I've had to use Leonard.
Then get the other one. Pass the butter.
Hang on. I don't feel like you're taking this dilemma seriously.
Fine, Sheldon. You have my undivided attention.
Okay, now, the PS4 is more angular and sleek looking.
No way!
It's true, but the larger size of the Xbox One may keep it from overheating.
You wouldn't want your gaming system to overheat?
No, well, you absolutely would not. And furthermore, the Xbox One now comes with a Kinect included.
Included?
Yes. Not sold separately. Although the PS4 uses cool new GDDR5 RAM, while the Xbox One is still using the conventional DDR3 memory.
Why would they still be using DDR3? Are they nuts?
See, that's what I thought. But then they go and throw in an ES RAM buffer.
Whoa, wait a second. Who's they?
The Xbox.
You're kidding!
No, I am not. And this ES RAM buffer should totally bridge the 100 gigabit per second bandwidth gap between the two RAM types.
This is a nightmare. How will you ever make a decision?
See, I don't know. What should I do?
Please pass the butter!
So this was like a small snippet from the Big Bang Theory for people who know that the character Sheldon, the person, the man in the show, he's a very, very intelligent and smart person. And in this whole conversation, he is actually still giving the most amount of information to his friend. But we see throughout the conversation, he's unable to convince her to listen to him in full regard, though she agrees to, but I don't think she really cares anymore. And similarly, all the information that he has hardly even passes into her knowledge base, right? So just like Sheldon, a large number of us, we read so much, we have so much of knowledge, we have so many ideas, we have so many thoughts, but it's almost very difficult to put it in a way to make sure that the person hears it out. I mean, I don't know how the show works or like whether the scriptwriter would have an issue with it. But honestly, if I was Sheldon, I would tell my friend in the very beginning that I'm very excited about the PS3 new launch, right? But I'm a little confused about why they name it in a different way. That is all he had to say. But he started in a very different cyclical manner, which is why his audience's attention span greatly reduced to what it would have been in a different context. Anyway, so now that we got a little break on understanding this, once we talk more about the Minto Pyramid Principle, I think the conversation will fall in place and y'all will also understand why I wanted y'all to see this. So if we're going to talk about the Minto Pyramid Principle, it would be a little rude to not talk about Barbara Minto. So now Barbara Minto is a very, very interesting person. So she was actually a secretary for the American Railways. And in those days, women working in general in the 1940s, around 1940s, 1960s, it was, like I said, very new for women to be in the workforce. And she was a secretary. And she had this idea, this thought that, the person who she reported to, her supervisor, would eventually, when they eventually leave the job, she might lose her job as well. So she got very scared. So she decided to join Harvard Business School. And she was actually only one of the 8 first women with an MBA degree. Which is very interesting. And then she goes on to work with McKinsey & Company, where she becomes a consultant. And even in that situation, she was one of the only women to be in consulting for the first time. While she was in McKinsey, she says, and I quote her, she says that when I was in McKinsey, it was a lot of fun to work with them because that's when we were making the structures to things that are principles right now. So she recalls this one incident that she and her colleagues went to a little bar called Feathers, and they started talking about a client, and they decided to understand that what could they do. And Barbara keeps saying that she always thought of things as a pyramid. She always thought of a solution, and then she wanted to put things in place as to how she got to them. So she said, okay, this is something that other people should know. And that's how we are all here. We are listening to the pyramid principle, which works on something called the MEAS. Now, a lot of people call this the MECE or MECE, but Barbara Minto said that though Aristotle himself has created this first, she's the author, so she gets to call this how she wants it. So she calls this MECE, which stands for mutually exclusive and collectively exclusive. And that is the basis for the pyramid principle. So now if you can see there's a structure on the right, there is a box on the top that is the space for, like I said, the solution, the answer to the whole problem. Now problems could range from business problems to all other problems. And then after the answer is in place, you start giving your supporting arguments. Now, something very important to understand before we make a pyramid, how we understand how to make a pyramid is to understand how people process information. Now, to understand that best, I could give you several examples, but another better way is y'all help me in something. So here's a list. Here is, let's call this a household grocery list. And I want you all to look at it. I'm going to call it out once. And yeah, then I'm going to ask any one of y'all to help me get the list without seeing the screen at all. So the list goes like apple, brush, potato, milk, lamp, saucepan, curtains, pots, carrots, spatula, cheese, mangoes, cushions. Okay, so now we take like 10 seconds. Okay. Now, can any one of you all volunteer to help me with the list? Can you all just, without seeing the screen, tell me how many you can remember? Actually, I stop sharing the screen. Maybe that'll help.
It's still on the screen.
Sorry.
Mhm. So we got more than 10 seconds.
A little bit more. So that's in everybody's favor. How many of you all want to? Someone volunteer.
I'll go first.
Okay, go for it. Tell me which ones you
Okay.
can remember.
Apple, milk, cushion. Then there was spatula, I think.
Okay.
And was there a lamp?
Okay.
Okay.
You got quite a few. You got like 5. Yeah.
Okay.
No, 4.
4. Ritika, 4. Okay.
Okay. I'm good.
Carrot,
Yeah, carrot was also there.
brush, and potato.
I think I want to wrote it down.
You have to list all. Anybody who tries
Yes,
has
this
to
is
list
not a
all.
collective.
You
Just
just don't
because
have
I
to
use
add to it.
collectively exclusive doesn't mean y'all, just focus on collective and work on this collectively. This is like an individual activity.
There was sauce also, I think.
I can give it a try.
Go
Yeah.
for it.
Apple, milk, potato, brush, saucepan. Okay. That's it, I guess.
5. There are total 13. So everybody did a great job. So I think, ma'am, do you want to try?
No, I think because since I'm listening to the what's in my mind.
Sir, do you want to give it a try?
Yeah. Apple, brush, potato, pot, saucepan, spatula, cartons, milk. Just spatula, carton. It's a lamp. Was potato. M. Was something with M. Milk. Okay, I'm at 9.
So you got several. Sir got a large number, though like there were no pots. No pots were there. Sorry, sir.
Yeah,
Sorry,
pots
sorry,
was
sorry.
there.
Yeah, pots were
I
there. My bad, my
actually
bad.
tried to remember with the alphabet, so it makes it easy. A, B, C.
Okay.
So yeah, I remember
Thank you,
P
sir.
pots. Yeah.
So okay, now I think we'll go back to the screen. And I mean, we'll actually review Sir's technique. We'll discuss that. So I think that's how the brain works. There are several
Oh,
techniques.
I miss mangoes. Jeez.
So that's how our brain works. We try to want to make sure that we remember everything we can, but our brains have so much of information at one point. We usually compartmentalize. I don't know all the people who answered, how many of y'all did this? But one thing that a lot of people do is they compartmentalize based on the element. So in this, the number of like 13 different things, there were fruits, there were vegetables, there were dairy products, there were kitchen items, and there were room elements, right? And so a lot of people give me a mixed match of answers. A lot of people could remember more common words like apples and a brush or even milk because those are daily items within their daily life. So different people have different structures, but I think we do this a lot where we compartmentalize and try to imagine what we are trying to remember. That helps. So that's one, compartmentalizing the information. The other form is putting logic to things. So a lot of people do this. So they're like, okay, so there were so many words, there were 13 words. So they think of this. So they're like, okay, if I get milk, I must get it in a saucepan. So they make a story out of it. So when you give a logical order to how you're remembering things, why you're remembering things, you're able to remember them better. Now, taking all of these characteristics of the human mind and how we remember, Barbara Minto presents this. She says, in our minds, there is a constant pyramid. She says there's a top topic, which is in this case household items. Then there we segment it to edibles and inedibles. And from edibles, there are fruits, vegetables, dairy, and inedibles, kitchen and rooms. Now, of course, when we see it the first time, our first argument is I don't think any of us does this in our minds. But it's so much in our preconscious, it's so much a habit that we don't even realize that that is what we're doing. That is the kind of information that we have in our minds. Think about this. You're sitting with a group of people. I'll just give you all a very, very recent example. The other day, I met a friend of mine. After 5 years, and she was sitting on my left, and she started cracking her fingers like this. And I just like, she was talking about something very new about her life. I stopped her and I said, "You still crack your fingers while you're saying something important." She smiled and she said, "You remember? Did I always do this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you did." So I think that's how beautiful, memories in our mind are. We have all these people in our heads who we associate a face with, we associate probably a smell with, we associate probably small thoughts and memories with. And that kind of compartmentalization is happening in our brain right now, even while I'm talking, even when I'm retrieving a memory and sharing it with y'all. That's how it's working. But I'm able to communicate it. So that compartmentalization is helping, and that is what we're going at. So now, when we're talking about a pyramid, a lot of people can say, okay, let's talk about shapes and shaping our ideas. Why a pyramid? Now I think Barbara Minto says this several times. She says that because think about it, a pyramid starts at an apex. So we all have to start somewhere. And then it's always easy to start and then have levels from it. So in this case, though it does not directly coincide with what happens in communication or what happens in a consulting world with the Minto pyramid, but if you replace the household with more an answer to a more critical question, then you are starting with the answer and then you're going on to explain it. So you order your thoughts from top to bottom. You tell them this is what is going to happen, and then you tell them why it's happening, how it's happening, and you further question it down till the very end, till you can justify your answer in all ways, in all forms, in all levels. But oftentimes it's very difficult to start with something. It's almost like you need to start writing a new short story that you need to give up for your school editorial board, and you just don't know where to start. So what you can do is you start thinking bottom up. You think how you can get to the answer, but when you present it from the answer below. Now, why is there this complication? First of all, I'm saying, okay, you start with the answer, you tell people what's going to be the ultimate situation. In other words, when we're writing a project, we call this a hypothesis. We say, okay, this is the hypothesis of my argument. You send that out and then you go on to explain your hypothesis. Often when we get to the hypothesis, I've done this personally, I research much more for the whole body of the project, and then I come to the conclusion, and that is the conclusion that I want out of the argument. But what's important to notice is when I'm communicating it, when I'm putting it into words, when I'm presenting this to my instructor, I'm always telling them the hypothesis before. Because when they're starting to read it, they know what they're expecting at the end of the whole argument. But so, this is very important to understand. You order your thoughts from top to bottom, but you might also think from bottom up. Okay, now, of course, if we want to follow a process, there often are rules that just helps us make sure that we're following in a particular order. So these are a few rules that are stated by Barbara Minto. So the first set of rules that I want to cover are structural ideation rules. That is, how do we structure our ideas? Okay, now whether we're going top down or bottom up, these are very relevant in all forms. So the first one, ideas at any level in the pyramid must always be summaries of ideas grouped below. So now again, going back to this pyramid, right? I mean, your ideas on top, for example, fruits in this situation, are always the summaries of things below it. Now you can go on with the list. There could be apples, mangoes, guavas, papayas. It can go on. But whatever it is, the list above it, fruits, will be able to be describing everything below it. Number two, ideas in each grouping must always be the same kind of ideas. So ideas within the group of fruits are all edible items. Okay, so they are all segregated, they're all different as described, mutually exclusive, but they're collectively exclusive, right? Next, the third point is each idea in each grouping must always be logically ordered. Now, that is something that Barbara Minto puts a lot of emphasis on. She says that no matter how you present it, no matter how many segregations you have, fruits might have fruits that grow on trees, fruits that grow on plants, and it can go on, right? It can have vegetables with seeds, vegetables with no seeds. But at the end of the day, each of them should have a logical order, because the mind will get lost when you give people chronologies, when you give people uh, a chronology of your day-to-day life, but you do not follow an order. You have to logically place them because that's how your brain also structures it out. Now, maybe we can take this as an example. We can always say that you go grocery shopping, right? And I think this happens to a lot of people. You go grocery shopping, you go with a 10-thing list, and you get all these 10 things, and then you come to this counter and you see your favorite ramen noodles, and the whole packet costs more than the whole list of things that you bought already. You don't need it, but you want it. So now Barbara Minto says that when you're making the household list, and if you have to report that household list to somebody, you better be able to put logically order it, that why that ramen in the first place got into your list. So I think that logical order is something that we always lose track in, not because we don't know enough. It's because we have so many ideas. It's often difficult to keep in order. But if you remember this while creating it, it's much easier to kind of go about with it. Now, structures within the pyramid. So these are very similar to the structural ideations as well, but this is something that pertains to you when after your ideas are ready and now you're forming your pyramid, then making it ready to communicate it in a particular fashion. So something that Barbara Minto always says is there should always be a vertical relationship between points and subpoints. That refers to the first point of the first rule. That is, all summaries and ideas grouped must be summaries of ideas above them. So there should be a vertical relationship where edible items must lead to things that are things that you can eat, right? So it has to be like points to subpoints. Then a horizontal relationship. Everything on the horizontal plane should somehow be related so that they eventually lead to the main crux, which is your answer. Now, thirdly, and something that is very important to understand, not only in communication for like consulting documents, but narrative flow in films, in novels, in movies. I don't know if you all have heard of this, but before films take form or before small short videos are made, there is always a storyboarding that happens. And a narrative flow is something that is taught to us in all forms of creative writing. So according to Barbara Minto, there is the SCQA. So she says A being your apex of the triangle, which is what you present to your audience. There is always three things backing it up: the situation, the complication, and the question. The reason your client comes to you for an answer is because they have a situation which dealt up with a complication, and your part is you have a question to them, and that's when you answer them, you give them the answer. Okay. Let's take an example where, say, for example, Disney is wants to open another theme park. Now, this is Disney, United States of America, where their headquarters are, and they're thinking, okay, where can we open it? So their situation is they want a new theme park. The complication is they don't know where it is. They come and approach you. Your question is, you have a few central questions. You tell them, okay, where more where do most people come from, or like where is your largest population hailing from? And then say, let's just say the answer is that you want to open you suggest to them that Disney should open a theme park in Mexico. And then when you're going on to explaining it further within your pyramid, you're telling them, okay, your key line one is that you should open it in Mexico because most number of Mexicans every year come to the headquarters, come to the Los Angeles theme park, the Disney theme park. Or it could be like most amount of Mexicans that live in United States of America come there, right? Or it can go on and on and on. You can have another completely different segment and be like, okay, because you don't have any business establishments anywhere near Mexico, maybe that is a space you need to explore. And you've done this before and it's worked, and so on and so forth. Okay. So that is what Barbara says, that you should always have a situation, you should always have a complication, you should always have a question. But these are three things that you do not tell your client. So when you're giving your presentation, you are giving them the answer, but you cannot go completely clueless, right? There needs to be an introduction. So she says there needs to be an introduction, and in that introduction is where you talk about the situation, you talk about the complication, and you talk about the question. Now, the premise is there is always how to build a pyramid. There is always a sentence at the top of the pyramid, which in this situation is your answer to the whole problem. Then that sentence will always have a subject and a predicate. And the subject of the document becomes the subject. Sorry, there is a typing mistake here. What I meant is the subject of the sentence becomes the subject of the document, right? If in our situation, um, you open a theme park in Mexico, then that becomes subject of the document. Why Mexico, right? And then you go on to explain it further. Your sentence is the answer to the question that already exists in the reader's mind. And I think the reason I bolded this out is that though we often look at situations where we are like, we need to approach a reader with the point of view that the reader knows nothing about it. But in a situation like this, the reader knows, the reader is aware, right? But they don't want your whole document to be that. So what the reader knows are things that you stop at your introduction, which we will cover in the next slide. But it's very important to understand that somehow you have an insight on what the reader is thinking. Because once you know that, that is when you're able to communicate it in their way. Now, how do you build a pyramid? You draw a box, you decide your question, you write down the answer, you identify the situation, you develop the complication, you recheck the question and answer it. So now we might often think that, okay, if we have a situation, if we have a complication attached to it, and if we have a question that arises out of the situation with the complication, one answer should be enough. But we all know that no solution can be a single solution, right? That solution can have further questions. Okay, you're opening a Disney theme park in Mexico. Why? How? Why right now? Why not later? Why where there are several other issues, right? Several other geopolitical issues. So the question keeps going on. So you need to keep rechecking your question, and you need to keep rechecking your answer before you go and communicate this to your client, right? And these are internal things. This is not something your client needs to know. They don't need to know how many times you revisit it, something that you have a great knowledge in. But when you present it to them, they need to know that you have checked all premises. They need to know that you have checked all possibilities, so that any kind of question that arises in their mind, you already answered it. And you tell them that I didn't put this because so and so, because you've already made several pyramids in your head. And this is what helps you, because it oftentimes, I think, in very busy schedules, specifically in the life of a consultant, you're unable to capture and do several things at once in a very smooth way. But when you compartmentalize your information, you compartmentalize your ideas, you put your information in different boxes and spaces, you know how to approach it. You don't feel like you know so much and you don't know how to put it together and present it, right? Another thing that we discussed was, a lot of times, even though we go from top to down, we think bottom up. Now, how do we do it and how do we make it easy? I think I do this a lot. You list all your points that you want to make. Right before this, you can check my diary. I've made at least 10,000 points and then I've cancelled and made another. 10,000 is a little bit of a hyperbole, but like I've made like around five before I started this meeting. And so it's very important. I think it's very important to list all your points down so you don't miss anything out. Revisit your list, make several lists, not one, not two, make three, four, five. It's okay if none of them work out. Maybe you'll go for the 10th one, but make lists. Then number two, you work out the relationships between them. If A comes after B, why is that so? Is A and B very similar? Can I omit B? Can I only have A? Do I need to say all the information that I need? Can I summarize them? Can I put more level boxes? Right? You can have summaries. When they say that one particular level needs to be a summary of other levels, they're also trying to tell you that you need to make sure your ideas are also compartmentalized in a very logical way, right? If you keep talking about the same thing in different ways under different compartments, then beyond a point, you will lose the attention of your audience. You don't want to do that. You don't want to sound repetitive. You want to sound like someone who's done their work. And most of the time that is the case. And because of communication, it often becomes that, oh, that person might just might not know enough, which isn't the case. And lastly, you must always draw conclusions, always make sure that whatever you're saying, whatever your lists are doing, no matter how the relationships are binding up, it needs to lead back to your answer. Your answer is key. Because if you forget that, then the whole pyramid's going to fall flat, right? I mean, just think about it. Without the apex, the pyramid is just going to be a completely different structure. I mean, I'm not very good with naming structures, probably hexagon. Oh no, like a rectangle, but a different shaped rectangle. I think that's what it's called. Oh, what is it? Okay, someone prompted something, but I couldn't hear them. So it's just like, without the apex of your triangle, a triangle ceases to be a triangle. So a pyramid ceases to be a pyramid, right? So you need to always draw conclusions. And lastly, because this is the Minto principle, and like I said, this is phase one, so maybe we'll have more space and many more meetings like this to discuss this further and have several other phases and dig deep. Barbara Minto is how we need to think. We need to be Barbara Minto. We need to put ourselves in her shoes. But before we do that, there are a few key points that we could remember, because this is something that we're beginning the Minto principle with. Something that Barbara Minto herself says is, always try top down first. Always try to think, though there is the ideation structure where you're going down to up, she's still suggesting try to go top down. It keeps you more grounded. This is your solution and you know exactly whichever level you are, you're somehow relating back to the solution. Whereas if you start the other way around, it does help you at oftentimes, but you are still a little clueless. You're still lost in the hay. There is still possibility that your solution is a little, it's like the flame on a burning candle. It's flickering, right? You don't want that. You want it still stable, so that your pyramid is stable from the very beginning. Number two, you use the situation as the starting point for thinking through the introduction, right? So like I said, the SCQA, this is something you all are going to learn once we delve more into the Minto principle. The situation is very important. Unless you know what's happening, you will not know the complication. You will not have a question to it. And your answer there cannot be an answer in void, right? I mean, I was going to give an example, but anyway, so like there's your answer cannot be involved. Number three, don't omit to think through the introduction. Okay, this is where we come to the introduction. So now that we've discussed how our whole document, how our communication is going to pan out, is also very important to understand that that communication will have an introduction to it. And in the introduction is where you talk about the situation, the complication and the question. So your reader in this situation is a client who has given you the situation in the first place. So try to keep it very brief. They already know about the situation. They know the question. They know the complication. They don't need to be told again, but you need to use 2 lines or a few lines to explain what's happening so that you can set context to your answer. Please make sure that beyond the introduction, neither does the situation, nor does the complication, nor does the question go ahead. Your document is about your answer, and that is all it's about. Now, always put a historical chronology in the introduction is, again, this is what it emphasizes on, that you cannot be talking about what the history of the company is, the history of the question is within the chronology of the whole document. But it's also important to mention that in the introduction. So keep it and base it till that. There must be some historical understanding in the introduction. This will set base for the reader or the audience to feel that you know about them, that they and you are kind of thinking in the same space. You're aligned in your thought so that when your answer comes about, they know that you know. Now, always limit the introduction to what the reader will agree with is true. So oftentimes what happens is that you set an introduction, you tell them your ideas, but your answer is something completely different, something completely out of the box, something that the organization has never tried, something that they will never want to try. You'll have to convince them through your answers. You know, tell them that why it's important. You have to give them, you have to tell them this organization did it, that organization did it, that was successful. But in your introduction, if you say that, if you tell them that your idea is completely out of the box, completely different, they might not want to hear anymore. It's human psychology to not want to be challenged about their thoughts. No one wants to be told that they're wrong. No one wants to be told that they didn't think about this. No one wants to be downsized in terms of their intelligence, intellect, and smartness. Neither do I. None of us do. And that is how our audience is also going to work. And lastly, be sure to support all your key line points. Make sure that no matter which level it is, it's always being supported by a summary or further key line points. Like whatever you're saying within your document needs to lead back to something, needs to be supported by something. And I think that's very important, again, to go back to the structure of the pyramid, structure of a triangle. There's always needs to be a very strong base. So does his sides need to be strong. So does the point of the apex need to be strong. Because honestly, it's just 3 lines standing together, right? I mean, try to balance three chopstick like or toothpicks together. It's very, very difficult, right? So we need to base it. We need to put other toothpicks on the side, make it a 3D figure to make it look like a pyramid. And that's why it's very important. That's why probably Barbara Minto used a pyramid instead of a triangle. So we need to constantly support it, the key lines and so on and so forth. So I think that is about it for phase 1. And yeah, so I think that's my take on it. But I would really want people to ask me questions. Maybe that way I'll be able to stop myself from segmenting myself into thinking like I know. So y'all tell me where and what questions y'all have and what I can share more.
I can only say
Thank you.
brilliant, Kannita. It was
Thank you, sir.
very well articulated, brilliant, pretty captivating. The way you presented the contents, everything, and how well you researched on this. It's now a question of if you can also guide us, or we also have to think about how to apply these principles of Barbara Minto in our presentation and communication to the client. I mean, consulting firms, they do use it. We used to have our challenge sessions also by the Barbara Minto Pyramid. People asking this, what is the situation? What is the complication? What's the question here? What are you trying to answer? So, but we have to start doing these things now here. Because particularly before an important presentation, this Barbara Minto Pyramid Principles was applied to do a dry run, to do a challenge session for the presentation that what's the final answer? towards the top of the pyramid that you are trying to pu-
Yes.
put forth. Yeah. If you can bring in also some cases, case studies, I mean, take one of our presentation and challenge that where does it go wrong, where the Barbara Minto principle is not being followed. It doesn't actually have a proper pyramid structure or a question or full support of the chopsticks. It's not exactly a very well supported pyramid. That would be very helpful with a proper case. You can take 2, 3 of our presentation and can see that applying the Barbara Minto, how not so good a presentation could be converted into a much more convincing thing.
No,
But
no, sorry.
yeah, no, go ahead, yeah.
I was just saying that, I mean, when you say that in terms of applying it to, I think, our people, I mean, this is just a personal thought and people can challenge this. I feel that individually, everybody works in ways like there was one example where they said that we always make lists. And I've personally seen my colleagues working around me doing that. When a project comes in, they're making lists, they want to do it. But I think what happens, I think if we take this out of context and, the horizontal relationship that we talk about, I think within a team, if there is a horizontal linking up, if everybody has 5 ideas, if they put the 5 ideas on the plate and then they intermingle and make a consolidated list, they're able to go back to it. And, they're able to like put it in a pyramid. And I think that that is something that we can totally do. Maybe we can start with daily activities. I mean, how a particular person starts their day, and they can bring us their pyramids. And then, we could apply the same thing at like a more like a business project, is what I feel.
Yeah, sure. I mean, a good idea. Yeah, it's very difficult actually for us, for any people to apply the knowledge that we are getting here into a different context, into a different scenario
Yes.
situation. Like today, what you were teaching with an example of the apple pots, that how to do the logical grouping, edible, inedible households and all that. So we understand the logic, we understand how that is to be done. But when I take these concepts to make a presentation to a client tomorrow, like you're making a presentation to ITC, so at that time, possibly it becomes very difficult that how do I really apply this concept that I've learned here to apply it there. So that's
Yes.
where we need more training of our brains to see that how
Yes.
one lesson learned in one context could be applied in some other context. So we have to practice it through our presentation because those presentations are the main, I mean, the mostly used avenues of communicating formally to a client, apart from the one-on-one conversations or in group meetings. So how do we really do that? Yeah, I mean, always this question come out that what is the central moot point that you are actually trying to drive at? So what is
Yeah.
the question? We sometimes our presentation has a lot of thoughts, but we do not direct exactly towards this is the question that I'm trying to answer. And more
Yes.
we can make it, more we can make it pointed, more impactful it is on the client also. That this is one question that I'm trying to answer.
Yes.
You can try that out, 2, 3, 1 or 2 of our presentations. Since you said it's a part one, part two, you can show some such cases also.
Yes, I think the new cases that are coming in right now, because they're still so fresh and we're still going to be approaching them. I think one part where we would, need like a help from the client side would be the part about the question. I think there's so much that we need to ask them, and then they give us more the complication to understand, because we know the situation, complication is understandable, but we have few questions. Once our question is set, our answer can also be more set. So I think so we can start with the new projects completely and see how it works out. And then maybe
Yeah,
keep a
I will
calendar also.
just mention one more point and then pause for others to come in because my brain automatically gets trained towards oriented towards more business development side. So new projects,
Yes.
when a project has come, that of course will be answering, but it becomes very impactful on a business development side when you actually have not got a project, but what exactly is the question in the client's mind that you are trying to answer? And
Mm.
if you can hit the bullseye, then you're getting the job becomes much easier. But sometimes we make a sales presentation, but possibly we show our wisdom, we show that how we know the subject, this is who we are, how strong we are, this is an approach that you take. But at the end, we do not clearly answer that what exactly was the pain point that the client was wanting me to heal.
Yes, sir. I totally agree. I think a lot of other examples that I was reading while they were giving case studies to understand this better was also saying this, that a lot of times people keep beating around the bush and they keep talking about this. So they give an example of a very young consultant who's writing a letter to like his experience with the client, and he goes about talking about several things all at once, and then the client replies back with, I don't understand you, right? Because and then we need to understand that so much of effort goes into using well thought out thoughts by not presenting them properly. And it's basic human tendency that if a document is that's completely confusing and we read it a little and we don't understand, even if it's coming again in a more structured way and we see similar words, we lose interest because the first, like it's a very common saying. I don't know if you all believe in it, that first impression is the last impression. So like if you go the first time and you're going in a very like completely clumsy manner, there is no way, no matter what you do, you change yourself, you've made your impact. Unless that particular person is very adaptive. And most people in the world aren't. Everybody doesn't think the way we do. So I think so we can totally
Yeah.
start beginning
Yeah.
thinking new
Very
ideas.
well done. Very well done. It was really, really very thought-provoking, good revelation. I didn't check my WhatsApp also. It was so captivating. I didn't look at my mobile. And the shape that the which we are not getting is quadrilateral.
Thank you,
So
sir.
good.
So I also followed the pyramid principle only while doing this.
I was saying rectangle, a different type of rectangle which we're trying to make is a quadrilateral.
It's a quadrilateral. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry.